Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Brian Lusk. Welcome to the channel. Let's go ahead and dive right into what's going on. I got some stuff from President Zelensky right off the bat from the D-Day celebrations and his time in France. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Now, a lot of this is, there's some videos here, several minutes long. Literally, I just got home, so everything is just kind of a little bit crazy at the moment, but we're going to get right into this thing in a moment and try and get you guys seeing all the good information here. Okay, let's get this set up here, and we'll start off with President Zelensky's meeting with Joe Biden in Paris, where they discussed Ukraine's defense capabilities, the situation on the battlefield, and preparations for signing a bilateral security agreement.
You continue to fight in a way that is just remarkable, And I'm not going to walk away from you. I apologize for those weeks of not knowing what's going to happen in terms of funding, because we had trouble getting the bill that we had to pass that had the money in it from some of our very conservative members who were holding it up. But we got it done finally. And since then, including today, I've announced 6 packages of significant funding. Today, I'm also signing an additional package for $225 million to help you reconstruct the electric grid. But once we got the national security bill passed, that was a political issue. We were able to get it all done. And the way you've stood and holding on in Kharkiv, and you've proven once again the people of Ukraine cannot and will never be overtaken. And I assure you, the United States is going to stand with you. You've said that all during this debate. I continue to say it. The United States is standing with you. You are the bulwark against the aggression that's taking place. We have an obligation to be there. And so I'm looking forward to having a detailed discussion with you about where we go from here. But we're still in completely, thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. First of all, thank you so much for your significant support, your administration. We are very thankful from all Ukrainians to your military support, financial support, humanitarian one, and of course it's very important. And our meeting here is very symbolic. It's very important that you stay with us. This bipartisan support with the Congress, it's very important that in this unity, United States, America, all American people stay with Ukraine. Like it was during World War II, how the United States helped to save human lives, to save Europe. And we count on your continuing support and standing with us shoulder to shoulder. Thank you so much. And this big package, which been signed it and supported and voted, and it's very important. It's so necessary for the feeling of our people that we are not alone. We are with you, with our strategic partner. And of course, I want today to speak about strengthening of Kharkiv region. You said already, it's so important. And your decisions have been very, very had a very positive influence. I don't want to share everything, all the details with press, sorry, but I think there are some details on the battlefield which you need to hear from us. We are thankful for this. Also, I want to speak about air defense totally on our territory, and we are thankful for participation in Peace Summit on the level of Vice President. Thank you so much. We think that we will have more than 100 countries, and I hope that it will be a first step on this way to peace. We need peace in Ukraine, but we will stay. Anyway, stay strong. And of course, I want to discuss some future events. Thank you again.
So that's President Zelensky and Joe Biden in basically a press conference discussing the needs of Ukraine and the challenges they've been facing. With President Biden, yes, he's sounding pretty rough there, but promising that we would continue with Ukraine. Zelensky also went and met and greeted D-Day veterans over at the anniversary ceremony that they carried out. One of those veterans got into a brief discussion with President Zelensky, and they were both insisting that the other one was the real hero. And I think I've got a little bit of video of that. Yep, short video. Let's pop this back here.
Oh, sorry, Justin Trudeau. Canada, the Canadian Prime Minister. Yeah, the Ukrainian Prime Minister is busy fighting right now.
Oh, you're the savior of the people. Here's my eyes. Got a picture.
Yeah, you want a picture?
I hear
No, you are our hero.
yes, I hear every one of you. I pray for you.
Thanks a lot. 80 years ago,
I don't know if you could hear that D-Day veteran at the end there saying, "I pray for you." These are men who knew what was going to happen when they stormed those beaches and figured they were going to die. They're looking at what's happening today and realizing that if Ukraine falls, the sacrifice that they made 80 years ago, storming the beaches of Normandy, will be required again. An emotional moment, to say the least. There was a brief moment where President Zelensky spoke in French to the French Parliament during his visit with France. He said, "Thank you for defending life together with us." And the local ministers of Parliament gave him a standing ovation. And of course, he did other discussion of the situation, saying they don't want to end the war with the Russians taking all this land that they hold at the moment. And he says, "Can Putin win the war?" No, because you and I have no right to lose. Can this war end on the current front lines? No, because there are no lines for evil, just as there were 80 years ago. And if someone tries to draw temporary lines themselves, it will only give a pause before a new war. And we've seen this pattern happen over and over and over with Russia, where they have aggressively gone after little snippets of territory, just little nibbles to try and see if they can get away with it without actually triggering a full response. And so far, NATO and the Western powers have been like, it's just not worth it for us to get involved. I mean, Chechnya, Georgia, they're just not worth it. It's just a small piece of territory. They'll be all fine without it. And we don't need to get involved. This is the same thing that happens when people come across a mugging happening, and instead of getting in there to help the person being mugged, they pull out their cell phone and start taking a video. Or they stand around and they're just like, ooh, wow, somebody should do something. Somebody really should do something. That's awful what he's doing over there. Somebody should do something. Well, the one thing that I want to point out about the United States is that it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Therefore, someone that should do something about it is us, the American people. Moving forward, let's see, there was something that I thought was interesting here that I think I'm going to pop over to as my next step here. From Tatarigami UA, who is a former Ukrainian officer and founder of intelligence inside one of the open source intelligence organizations, talking about the hybrid warfare that Russia's been carrying out against the West. In Ukraine, this has escalated into the largest war in Europe since World War II. And I'm going to read some of this, and I'm going to summarize some of this. And it's fairly long. So rather than making it so you have to listen to me for the whole thing, I'm going to post the link here. Steve says, don't forget those who fell after D-Day. The casualties were very bad for the following few months. Some units had more than 100 casualties. Absolutely true. And there was blood and toil and pain all the way to the end of the war when Germany finally surrendered to the Allied forces. And in many ways, even in the time after. But this is there's nothing I can say that will change or do justice, I should say, do justice to all of the suffering that happened both on D-Day, D-Day +1, +2, +3, +365, etc. So, within a decade, hybrid warfare against the West, and Ukraine escalated into the largest war in Europe since World War II. And to grasp how demographically and economically smaller Russia achieved this, we need to look at the underlying processes, including escalation management. And it's a bit about escalation management I found very, very interesting. We need to start with the concept known as reflexive control, a method to shape an opponent's mindset, steering their behavior towards the initiator's desired outcome. Russia used it to influence the West's mindset, suggesting that any aid could lead to nuclear escalation. It's a classic feint. You try and make the other guy think you're going to slug him in the face. Instead, you're going to punch him in the gut. Anything to get his defense up here instead of down here where you really want to hit him, or down low instead of up high when you really want to deliver that punishing blow. Tactics were influential back even in 2014 to 2015 with like Angela Merkel over in Germany looking to pursue peace resolutions in Ukraine on Russia's terms. Fearing conventional or nuclear escalation, many leaders embraced what they deemed responsible politics. This sounds like a certain person from World War II waving a piece of paper in the air and declaring peace for our time. Until recently, Russia avoided direct political confrontation with NATO. Instead, it employed tactics known as salami slicing tactics, limited expansionist actions, where Russia's small territorial gains may initially seem insignificant compared to the risk of a nuclear war. I just want this little bit. I just want Crimea. I just want the Donbass. I just want these pieces of Georgia, these pieces of Chechnya. I just want, and every time they just want a little bit more and a little bit more, a little bit more. It's like the camel in the tent thing. If you let the camel get its nose in the tent, soon enough the camel will be in the tent, and you will be out in the sand in the sandstorm. And Stephen, no reason to say sorry. I like to talk about these things, and so I do. I talk about them a lot. What can I say? So little nibbles, little slices, salami slices. Despite de-escalatory efforts on the West side, limited aid to Ukraine, and the normalization of relations between Russia and many Western countries after 2014, including the restoration of trade despite sanctions, Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. The escalations are mainly caused by Russia's perception of the Western approach as overly cautious, interpreting it as weakness. Consequently, Russia sees an opportunity to exploit the situation until the Western response outweighs the potential benefits of its actions. And that's where we're at right now. This is, of course, that caused the limited amounts of aid, the quality of it maybe not being the best, the not really coming when it's needed, etc. Because every time Russia would escalate and the West would say, no, don't do that. They'd say, oh, you don't want to risk a nuclear war, do you? If you escalate in response to this, why, we're going to go nuclear every single time. And they haven't, obviously, thank goodness. So that's the plan, is that every time the West says, oh, we need to help Ukraine, they're like, oh, I've got all these nuclear bombs over here and these missiles, and you would just hate to have to light those off. Would never want to have that happen, and neither would you, would you? So that's Russia's tactic right there, basically blackmailing the West to not provide the most robust response. And it's come to a head to the point where Russia has outright invaded another country with no excuse behind it, with no legitimate reason, and has trying to put it forth there as though it's fait accompli. We have already taken all of Ukraine. You might as well give up on it, because otherwise we're going to nuke you. So a lot of this is talking about that situation, and the conclusion is the solution lies in deterring adversaries by demonstrating resolve and preparedness to counter any escalation. Russia needs to understand that the consequences of escalation would be unfavorable, dissuading it from initiating such actions. And so that's kind of Russia's modus operandi, how they work and how they've been working for a long time. And the amazing thing to me is that there are people out there who claim to be professors of history, to have studied the Cold War, the World War II, all the things leading up to the situation as it is right now. And they're saying things like, well, we don't want to risk a nuclear war, do we? Then Russia needs to get his butt out of countries that it doesn't belong. That's risking the nuclear war, because we got crazy people on that side, and we better be prepared to deal with them. Then there was this little bit of information I caught. This is a source I don't normally use a lot of. I have used them in the past. I kind of pulled them off because they've got a lot of information, and it's a lot of it is just not relevant to the war in Ukraine. And this time I just had an extra couple of minutes on my lunch break, so I was like, let me quickly scan this. And this stood out. This is the head of Sberbank, German Gref, who said that in Russia there is an unprecedented increase in wages and at the same time a shortage of goods. He announced this on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. So, wages are going up, but they have nothing to buy with the wages. But this is due to a combination of fiscal and credit impulses. The economy is growing at a good pace, he says. People are becoming wealthier. They're receiving loans. We see today our economic growth model is extremely simple. Increasing budget expenditures, primarily in the mechanical engineering sector, led to enterprises increasing wages, and the spread of wages increases throughout the economy is happening at a very rapid pace. Something we've never seen before. Over the course of approximately 3 months, not only machine-building enterprises, namely competition for personnel in mechanical engineering is growing, but also all other sectors of the economy, including service sectors, are raising wages. People become wealthier, they go to banks, and despite all the restrictions of the central bank, receive loans, even at very high rates due to the fact that their incomes have increased. However, this growth will not continue for long. How long this high wage growth will continue depends on when we run out of budget money. Most likely, the increase in budget spending will not continue for long. I don't know how long this can last. Maybe a year. Russia's already draining their rainy day fund. I believe it's called their growth fund, I think is what they call it. it's already down to far critical levels compared to what it was at the start of this invasion. And that's what they're basically propping up their budget with the reductions in oil revenue, Gazprom currently in the toilet, and everything else, and the manpower shortage, which is making wages inflate while not actually helping overall. All of this is government expenditures. Government expenditures do not grow an economy in the end. So that's where things are sitting here. They have to either be able to convert that labor into consumer goods that people can buy, or they have to keep turning it into tanks and planes for the war in Ukraine. And if they do that, that is literal direct loss. That is money pulled right out of their economy to build those weapons and equipment. And in the end, if they cannot convert that to civilian use in the end, it will have been money invested into nothing in the end. It's one of the things about Western stuff here is that they may expand their operation, but that expansion can then be turned into other uses to making additional things. And it looks like Russia is facing problems in getting that done. The Institute for the Study of War put out a really fascinating summary. This would be yesterday. Russian President Vladimir Putin sought to repackage long-standing tired threats about direct confrontation with the West by claiming that Russia will provide long-range strike capabilities to unspecified actors for strikes against the West. Putin's threats aim to influence Western decision-making about Ukraine's ability to strike military targets within Russia using Western-provided weapons, but notably does not threaten escalation in Ukraine or through direct confrontation, suggesting that the Kremlin may be adjusting to select Western perceptions about the credibility of such Russian threats. This is basically hearkening back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. They're trying to say that they're going to put their long-range weapons in their friends and that are angry at America, effectively, and have them attack America. That is not going to work the way Russia thinks it will. In fact, I don't believe that's going to make any difference to what they're doing because they have been providing all of their buddies that hate America weapons for more years than I can count. So it's going to be a non-issue is what it is. And if one of the lunatics he hands weapons to actually pulls it off, there will be a whole lot of flattened earth, and not just in America. Russian naval vessels will make a port call in Cuba on June 12th through 17th, likely as part of a larger effort to invoke the historical memory of the Cuban Missile Crisis as part of Russia's reflexive control campaign to encourage U.S. self-deterrence. I'm not going to go into the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's an extremely long and complex chain of events. I don't remember half the names right now anyway. I know enough to know that we were about half a hair away from nuclear exchanges during the Cuban Missile Crisis that were literally stopped because one man on a Russian submarine decided to go against the other two men in the chain of command. And he paid for that, as I recall. But in the end, no nuclear exchange, and the two sides came to some agreements where it involved the Russians pulling the missiles out of Cuba and the Americans pulling missiles out of Turkey. You know, it's just, and I just went through a whole summary of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So my apologies. Basically, they're trying to invoke an era when the U.S. was scared of Russia, but they forgot that the U.S. was scared of Russia enough to be ready to blow the snot out of Russia, not to cower in our holes because of Russia. Putin gave a press conference talking about the casualties in the war, and he may have inadvertently indicated what he thinks the actual combat casualties are. Number one, the numbers looked reverse for anybody who's been watching this from the Western perspective. He said that the Ukrainians were experiencing 50,000 casualties per month, but the Russians were suffering roughly 5,000 is what he said. But by taking 5,000 killed in action, adding about a 3-to-1 ratio for the wounded, that makes 20,000. Which is kind of on the low end, but close to what Ukraine says that Russia's casualty counts are. So this could be an indirect confirmation of the roughly 20 to 30,000 number that's been out there for the monthly casualty rates that we're seeing for Russia. They have been working on making more sustainable force generation progress here, trying to make sure they're keeping up with or slightly exceeding the number of soldiers they're losing on the battlefield. This appears to be working well enough that they're able to start forming some reserve forces instead of rushing everything to the front lines. But this appears to be a slow process that is taking a long time to carry out. Then there's another interesting thing that came up. Limitations on Western capabilities to train partner pilots on F-16 fighter jets are reportedly creating bottlenecks that will affect Ukraine's ability to effectively field F-16s in the future. The U.S. can train 12 F-16 fighter pilots a year, according to the report I saw. The Netherlands, I believe, can train 8. And the Netherlands has a much smaller economy. I'm going from memory on the country and the numbers. I know it's 12 and 8. I just don't remember for sure on the details on it. In fact, with basically they've got 60 F-16 aircraft coming to Ukraine sometime in the next few months. They won't have 60 trained pilots for it because the U.S. can only train 12 and another location can only train 8. It's not enough. Still, even that 20 pilots would be a start. They need to step up their game. The U.S. is big enough that we should be able to train 20, 30, 40, 50 people at once on F-16 fighter pilot training. It's a matter of political will. French authorities are investigating multiple recent pro-Russian sabotage and societal influence operations in France amid continued Russian hybrid war measures against NATO states and France aimed at weakening support for Ukraine. These appear to be backfiring. I mentioned in the previous video the guy who blew up his own face with his bomb was a Russian citizen who lived in the eastern part of Ukraine, but he was a Russian citizen. And clearly, he was planning to carry out an attack in France, timed to coincide likely with the Olympics. These are starting to backfire on Russia because the West is starting to say, hold on a second, time out. You start pulling this stupid stuff right here, and we're going to have to start actually noticing. France has been getting serious. The Russians actually investigated a French citizen in response to the arrest of this Russian terrorist. And as I've seen in multiple places, don't go to Russia, people. You're just begging to become collateral for the next prisoner swap, and you will not like your experiences there. I've heard that the accommodations are not accommodating. So a lot of good stuff out of the Institute for the Study of War. Now let's talk for just a moment. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I want to give you guys the link to this because it's a fascinating look at what things could look like if the Western powers don't get their act together and get the lessons of Ukraine learned and now. And the story, they spin a story. In 2026, a British Army brigade is destroyed by Russian Lancet drones because they've been complacent and haven't prepared for this situation. They've gone in to do a mission, and their whole brigade was wiped out. This is just a story, not actually happening, obviously, because it's talking about 2026. But the thing is that it's calling out Western military power, saying you better start paying attention to what's going on, because warfare is changing before our eyes, and if you don't adjust now, you will find death and destruction your way when things really do kick off. Just found it really interesting. Steve says the French woke up long ago. Russia has been hitting their French colonies, and they are pissed. Yes, they are. I mean, Niger over there really, I think, was a wake-up call for them. That was only, last year? Going from memory, about 8 months ago? So there's a lot of things that Russia's not going to like about that. While they've got their allies and useful tools in the West, what they don't have is control. And our key is to not let them have it. All right, we talked about this weird $50 billion Ukraine loan that's conditional and blah, blah, blah the other day. I finally chased down the original article, and I'm going to go ahead and link it for you and give you my best summary of my understanding of it. Basically, the U.S. is ready to loan $50 billion to Ukraine that will be repaid by profits from frozen Russian assets. The kicker is, or the condition is, that the European Union has to indefinitely extend sanctions against Moscow until the end of the war. See, right now, the EU has to renew these sanctions every 6 months, and it has to be done by unanimous consent. And of course, they've got problems with people like Hungary, Viktor Orban, and a couple other useful tools that the Russians have suborned to their cause. So having those sanctions in that expiration chain means that if for some reason the sanctions expire and they aren't renewed, well, then that money that's currently being used with their interest actually repaying the loan would no longer be available, and the U.S. would be on hook for the entire $50 billion. So the deal is, you guys make those sanctions basically indefinite. We'll take the interest money off of that Russian money that we've got frozen, and we'll back that and loan it to Ukraine for rebuilding and military action. That is the overall situation there, as best I've been able to determine it. But that's the reason why I also provide the link to you, so that you can go through and find additional details on these weird things. Now, there are a few things that are just not known. There wasn't any information like interest rates or the conditions of the loan beyond that, anything like that. But that's the best information I've been able to find straight out on that loan. So, Robbie, I hope that helps you out on that. And I've given you the resource link there so you can do further research if you would like. And if you have any further questions, I can go back through and see if I can provide more explanation. Let me know. I'll be watching. All right, so we've gone through this is the first one in a while where I've had a whole bunch of key items I want to talk about right at the beginning. The visit by President Zelensky to France, the D-Day celebrations, the escalation tactics, the escalation management tactics, that is, of Russia, the shortage of manpower. Sorry, the shortage of the shortage of goods in Russia, and the relevant shortage in manpower. The situation with drones, and this loan that we talked about last time. Let's go ahead and get into the news out of Ukraine itself. Always happy to, Robbie, every single time. In the Kiev region, rescuers are working on the spot to extinguish a fire. This was an attack that struck an industrial area. I note that the background is blurred in all the pictures. Odds are there's unblurred pictures out there, but the odds are that this may have been an industrial target that was being used for military purposes, just because of the amount of blurring that's going on. That said, there's enough places that are being very generous in their censorship right now that it could just plain be they don't want to show a fire going on. Don't know, but just be advised. On the streets of Odessa, you'll see that there are generators lining the walkways. That's because power is a big problem in Ukraine right now. And so every location is firing up a generator to keep them in business on the many hours that they may be out of power. That's a lot of little generators to get it done. They probably aren't going to be running things like heavy duty air conditioners, but they might be able to keep a couple of registers running and a fan going, and maybe a refrigerator. This one's a fairly significant one, and that's an even bigger one right there. They're making do the best they can. They may have to pull out the generators, but doggone it, if they have to pull out the generators, it's better to pull out the generators than have the Russians there. I don't remember the exact wording now, but early in this conflict, without food or without you, without freedom or without you, everything was without Russia. because they would give up everything to be without Russia. From Handon Herashchenko, in many areas of Kyiv, there is no electricity for up to 7 hours at a time. It is hard to imagine what it will be like in the winter. Experts say the blackouts may last for up to 20 hours a day in each area. Life-saving infrastructure cannot work like that, and people will die. It is very important now that we do everything possible and beyond to survive winter. Now he's doing not really a fundraiser, but he's looking for people who can help with getting generators for hospitals and the likes like that. So I don't know if you have any information along those lines. Maybe there's some government programs that might provide some generators. But either way, I just want you to understand what the power situation in Ukraine is looking like right now. It is not pretty, but they're making do. They're doing everything they can. Then there's this item from Crimean Wind. This is at a location in Sevastopol, which I think I got the pronunciation right this time, Robbie. This is a person standing there with it. Looks like a tiny Ukraine flag and trident pin. Tiny. And he's standing at a likely famous enough location. This MiG fighter, if I remember correctly. And he is there with this little flag. If he is caught by the wrong person, or she, I guess, caught by the wrong person here, right this moment, it's either prison or death. As much as it looks like it's not much, understand that these tiny acts of defiance are not just a cry for help. They are a demand for change. And that is the risk these people are taking. They're saying, we must have our country back. To the point where they are willing to put their lives on the line. It seems small, but if the wrong person caught them right this moment, it would be big. And this person could end up dead. There is apparently a new nuclear power unit going into Ukrenergo. This is going to temporarily improve the situation when it comes online, but it's not going to solve all the problems. It's not that large. This will ease up some of the restrictions. It'll be less strictly enforced because they will have a little more power generation capacity. No word yet on exactly when the new nuclear power unit will come online. Last night's drone attacks were actually pretty roundly defeated with the exception of a few Shahed drones, I think. There was like 5 that managed to get through, as I recall. And you can see what's interesting here is that there was a hit or two in Kyiv, and that's right here in the top end of the map. But by and large, the bulk of the attacks are avoiding the Kyiv region now, because this is where probably the lion's share of the air defenses are. That said, Kharkiv over here is going to be dealing with the extremely short range there, and I don't know if they can do anything about that except for a saturation of air defense. But either way, right now the counter battery fire is fierce over in Kharkiv. Ukrainian armed forces performed an exercise in the Black Sea, with Ukrainian amphibious assault groups conducting a series of operations that included landing on an unequipped coastline, with the group maneuvering from one coast to another in combat formation, avoiding enemy fire and dangerous areas. The boats and crews practiced complex maneuvering, regrouping, and joint actions at sea. Every time they do one of these practice runs where they've got these small boats doing landing operations, everybody's like, ooh, Crimea. But I'm going to point out that there is still a lot of Kherson that also needs to be liberated right about now. So this has, shall we say, multiple possible targets, and the Ukrainian armed forces are working on getting that practice in for that eventuality. Here we go. This is the missile attack overnight. I showed you the map of where it came through. 5 cruise missiles all shot down, and 48 of the 53 Shahed drones were shot down, according to Ukraine's Ukraine's defense forces there. So overall, that is still a pretty decent shoot down rate considering how bad it's been recently. This could be an indication that some of that air defense artillery, missiles, and the Gepard systems and other gun-based systems are getting into the right places now. This, however, did result in that fire that I mentioned earlier, but that happened in an industrial facility in the region. They do report no casualties. Probably true. I would assess that as likely true. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. Moving on to the news out of Russia itself. Russian soldiers, I'll say, heroically defending the motherland from the Ukrainian soldiers, recorded a video begging their government to provide potable water for their village of 2,000 people, out of whom 90 or 4.5% were sent to invade Ukraine. They had 7 dead and 12 wounded in their group. But come on, why can't Russia use some of that military money and instead provide water for their people? 2,000 people could really use some drinkable water there. Instead, they're spending their time in adventurism in Ukraine instead of investing in their own people and infrastructure. I wish they'd stop it because honestly, we could use some of that money for our own stuff too. But, we got to protect people that need the protection from those crazy people in Russia. Over in Russia, mass raids on migrants have intensified across the nation since June 4th, when the investigative committee chairman and Putin's law school classmate, Bystrykin, announced the need for crackdowns. The arrested are usually given a choice: go to prison or go to the military. And now you know how a lot of their recruiting is being carried out. Retired Moscow judge Natalia Larina, who had previously arrested political action artist Pyotr Pavlinsky, fell out of her apartment window. And before her death, she emptied her bank account and took out a loan and sent nearly 2 million rubles to finance the Ukrainian military. Now, there's been some additional details kind of floating around on this. I'm not sure I have it just handy here, but it sounds like she was called up on the phone and prompted to do this. I don't know if it was an outright scam or what. The family has declared that she was just so distraught at falling for this scam that she tossed herself out the window. It's strange how many people fall out of windows in Russia. This is that French citizen who was arrested after the Russian bomber basically blew himself up, exploded his bomb in his face. He was taken into custody. He was an advisor at the Swiss-based nonprofit Center for Humanitarian Dialogue and taken hostage in Moscow by the Kremlin regime. Again, don't go to Russia. So let's say you are a longtime friend of Vladimir Putin. He has entrusted you with the jewel of Russia's economy, the one that is making money hand over fist, year after year after year, driving the economy of the country, Gazprom. And all of a sudden, Gazprom is suffering huge, colossal losses due to sanctions. Well, how are you going to convince Vladimir Putin not to introduce you to the polonium tea? Well, you're going to put up a monument in St. Petersburg dedicated to victory in the Northern War. It is an enormous monument with a statue on top. I don't remember who's on top of it. So, I mean, that's basically, this is a model of the monument, and they're planning to build this thing. So apparently this is, I believe it was Peter. Yeah. Peter, the Tsar Peter, that they're the monuments to, but still, this is supposed to keep him from enjoying either the short flight out the window or the in-flight snacks in the form of the polonium tea. Over in Rostov Oblast, Ukrainian drones successfully hit the Russian Novoshakinsk refinery, causing a severe blaze to break out. They shut down operations, and a firefighting train has been deployed to the area. Yet another one of Russia's refineries are now put out of service. The Russians report from Donetsk. Donetsk people don't like us. The locals don't like us. They call us occupiers. Russian soldier Konstantin Sergeyevich Romaniuk, call sign Amish. He took out loans and went to war to return them. He was captured in the Kharkiv direction. He says that on the border in the Belgorod region, there are conscripts with orders to shoot retreating soldiers and deserters. There was no one left from the 1st Battalion, from the 3rd Battalion. If there is 100 to 200 men left from our battalion, that's the maximum. The 9th Regiment is definitely gone. Somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 men are definitely not alive at the moment. Either they are injured or killed or refuse to fight. So even in Donetsk, the area that Russia claims is just chock full of Russians who must be liberated from those evil Ukrainians, the locals say you are occupiers. Yeah. Of course, Vladimir Putin can't possibly let all this corruption in his military go without, putting a lampshade on the United States, declaring that there is more theft in the U.S. Army than in the Russian Army. This was made against the backdrop of a series of corruption criminal cases against high-ranking generals of the Russian Defense Ministry. Now, I'm not going to claim that there is no corruption in the U.S. military. I think you'd have to be insane to say there isn't. But when you compare it to that of the Russian military, where literally the contracts go into cardboard instead of explosive reactive armor, where the ballistic vests and the helmets are airsoft, where the tires are the cheapest things you can get from China instead of good quality truck tires that they would put on a military vehicle. I think methinks that he is projecting a little too much. From an economist here, which I'm just going to go ahead and play this. It's in a different language. I'm sure of that, so just read the subtitles here.
Я наблюдаю потрясающую
Let me get
картину
the pause.
самоубийства русской.
And we'll do this and this. I'll try and read along with it. It's a little bit fast this time. So
Я наблюдаю
I'm observing a
потрясающую
stunning
картину
picture of the suicide
самоубийства
of the
русской
Russian
экономики.
economy.
Это страшная картина,
It's a
но
scary but
завораживающая.
mesmerizing
Смотреть за
picture.
этим жутко
Watching it is
интересно. Все
horrifyingly
мои
interesting.
коллеги-экономисты
All my
это
colleagues,
понимают,
economists,
что мы попали в
understand that we
совершенно
happen to live
потрясающий
in an
исторический
amazing
период,
historical
когда великая
period
страна
when a
убивает
great
себя.
country is killing
И это,
itself.
наблюдать
Watching it is
страшно,
scary
но
but
ужасно.
terribly fascinating.
Это обратимый
Is it a
процесс?
reversible process?
Уже, наверное, нет.
At this
Еще
point,
раз.
it's probably
Страна
not.
– это прежде всего
One more
люди.
time, a country is first of
Вот
all
с людьми
its
в России
people.
полный швах.
When it comes to people,
Потому
there's
что
a
Россия
total
теряет
deficit in
население.
Russia because Russia
И
is
какими
losing its
людскими
population.
ресурсами я могу это
What
поднять?
human
Чтобы
resources
поднять
do I need to
экономику, мне
boost the
нужны
economy?
люди,
To boost the
мне нужны
economy,
деньги,
I need
мне
people,
нужно
money, and
международное сотрудничество,
international
международного
cooperation.
сотрудничества. Никто не
Nobody in the
поднимался.
world ever accomplished
Никто не
that without
поднимался в мире
international
международного
cooperation.
Ни
Not
одна
a single
страна,
country with
замкнувшись в своих
closed
границах,
borders
подняться не может.
can do it.
Она может быть
It can
Северной
only
Кореей,
become
которая
a
делает
North
ракеты.
Korea that
Вот всё,
produces
что она может.
missiles.
Я
That's
наблюдаю
all it can
потрясающую картину.
become. I thought that was a very fascinating interview right there. And while I wish I knew who the economist was, so I could give a little more information, but this did come from journalist Jason J. Smart. Speaking of, Jason J. Smart also provided this amazing picture here with a quote from chess master and now defender of democracy, Garry Kasparov. Every country has its own mafia. In Russia, the mafia has its own country. Another tugboat was sunk by, damaged. It's not been officially confirmed as sunk, although they called it a successful attack. A Project 498 Saturn or prototype tugboat was damaged or destroyed near the shores of temporarily occupied Crimea. Tugboats are some of the only ways that some of the Russian ships can get around. 2 radar stations were damaged as a result of a night attack in Crimea with a serviceman injured. They were slightly damaged, though. This is not a big attack, probably just drones that attacked the location and managed to do some damage to yet more of Crimea's currently very unsteady air defense systems. This is from the Defense Intelligence Department of the UK. On the 29th of May 2024, Ukrainian missile strikes damaged 2 Russian roll-on, roll-off, or RORO rail ferries on the Crimean side of the Kerch Strait crossing, rendering them non-operational. These rail ferries almost certainly provided the primary means of rail transportation for Russian fuel and ammunition trains, loads to Crimea due to the stringent security measures employed on the Kerch Bridge. Russia also operates vehicle RORO ferries to support the movement of heavy loads across the strait, which has resumed operations post-strike. The degraded rail crossing capacity almost certainly caused significant temporary disruption to Russian military logistics operations and potentially Crimea's fuel supply. Russia will almost certainly be forced to replace the rail ferry service as soon as possible, likely impacting its wider maritime logistics operations, or risk relaxing its procedures by using the rail bridge to transit fuel and explosive stores. The Ukrainian strike on the ferry crossings and subsequent attack on a nearby fuel depot highlights again the vulnerability of the strait to Ukrainian interdiction, despite Russia's significant investment in security and air defense. These ferries should have been under the protective umbrella of the S-400 systems that are protecting the Kerch Bridge. And yet, here we are. And that's the news out of Russia. Let's rock on forward with the news out of the international front over here. For one thing, the U.S. announced a new $225 million weapons package for Ukraine, including missiles for the Hawk air defense system, Stingers, ammunition for HIMARS, 155mm howitzers, 105 and 155mm artillery rounds, 81mm mortar systems, M113 armored personnel carriers. Pausing there briefly, the Ukrainians love to take those M113 armored personnel carriers and mount guns on top because they are typically not even armed. So they might do some creative things with more M113s. Trailers to transport heavy equipment, coastal and riverine patrol boats, noting that theme coming yet again. Tow missiles, Javelin and AT-4 anti-armor systems, small arms ammunition and grenades, demolitions munitions, night vision devices, spare parts, maintenance, and other equipment. Quite the little package heading over to Ukraine. The European Union Commission has confirmed that both Ukraine and, I hate it when they use flags instead, Moldova, there we go, have fully completed all steps to start talks for ascension to the EU. That's a big step. They better watch out for Hungary, who I believe is going to be taking the EU presidency in short order here. U.S. threats of secondary sanctions against Chinese banks is yielding results. Nearly 1/3 of payments made by Russian companies to Chinese suppliers since February 2024 have bounced with Chinese banks, refusing the transfers in both U.S. dollars and Chinese yuan. Those sanctions are having an effect. China is working around it in different little ways, but in the end, those banks have to deal with the West. If they can't, they won't be near as valuable to China. And if they don't, they won't be very valuable to Russia either in the end. Chairman of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee Mike Turner urges the administration to lift all restrictions on the use of ATACMS missiles against military targets inside Russia. Of course, as we know, Ukraine is prohibited from using ATACMS outside its own territory. That's the long-range version. The shorter-range versions are cleared for use just outside of the Kharkiv region, over in Belgorod, and that in the areas right across there. But, once again, we see various politicians taking the opportunity to make these comments here. French President Emmanuel Macron announced plans to transfer Mirage 2000-5 multi-role fighter jets to Ukraine. This includes updated avionics, countermeasures, radars, and weapons for air-to-air, air-to-ground, and air-to-sea. This is a very current model of aircraft, and it has a very new radar that's associated with it. So should be a great addition to Ukraine's menagerie of aircraft. But it will be hilarious if this gets operational in Ukraine even before F-16s do. Just saying. From President Zelensky, French aircraft in Ukrainian hands will prove Europe is stronger than evil. I am confident that the day will come when Ukraine will be able to see in its skies the same aircraft we saw yesterday, June 6th, in the skies of Normandy. Your combat aircraft, your brilliant fighter jets in the hands of Ukrainian pilots will prove that Europe is stronger than the evil that dared to threaten it. We don't know how many that Macron has promised to send over. And this reports that there were 5 coming. However, I believe that was misunderstanding the -5 and the model number of the Mirage 2000. That is a specific model number of the aircraft. Lucille states Hungary is going to take the EU presidency. Doesn't seem very smart. Absolutely correct. It's not very smart. A Polish guard was stabbed by an illegal migrant on the border with Belarus. At the time this released, he was believed to be clinically dead. However, later updates have shown that he did in fact pass away in this attack. This is genuinely an attack on Poland by Belarus. Calling it a migrant or illegal immigrant doesn't lessen the fact that Belarus shoved that immigrant over there with the means to stab and kill a Polish guard. Japan delivered a package of 101 vehicles, including Toyota HMVs, tracked material carrier vehicles, and Mitsubishi light trucks. None of this appears to be direct lethal aid, but I don't know. What I don't know is if there are restrictions on its use. So, for instance, the HMV right here, I know it can be armed. In fact, there's a variant that puts a Stinger missile launcher in the back of it, as I recall. There's options there. The question is whether Ukraine has permission to do so. I think they do, but I'm not sure. A poster has been put up outside the embassy of France in Moscow, calling on the French military to surrender and not to repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. Just as a reminder, the French did in fact take Moscow back in, I think it was the 1800s. Might be earlier than that. I'm going from memory there. It's been a while. My history classes have been a little bit longer than they should have been. The poster says that the French have already fought against Russia on the side of the Nazis. And this is another history lesson from Putin. That's a tall tale right there. They love their misinformation campaigns. Joe Biden did clarify the restrictions on strikes into Russia with Western hardware, at least U.S. provided hardware, saying we're not authorizing strikes on Moscow or the Kremlin. But he did add, Putin is not a decent man. He's a dictator. At least he's starting to say it now. Already talked about this earlier. Hungary has been obstructing decisions on Ukraine accession talks among the EU members. And I believe they want to get this done before, like I said, Hungary takes the presidency there. This is going back a ways here. Angela Merkel withheld information about Russia's intention to blackmail Europe with gas. I've mentioned this a few times before. If Russia had been a little bit more patient, they almost had Europe addicted to Russian gas. They were shutting down nuclear power plants, coal power plants, and using just gas power plants that were being fueled by the Nord Stream pipeline. So if they just held on a little longer and weren't crazy, they could have had Europe so addicted to Russian gas that they couldn't afford to anger Moscow. if they attacked Ukraine. But somebody got a little too itchy for the situation and jumped into an invasion of Ukraine anyway. But that's not this story here. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel was aware of Russia's intention to reduce gas supply to blackmail Europe to speed up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline launch, but concealed the information. Not everybody in Western powers is making the right decisions for their countries. Already mentioned this. I didn't even know there was currently a blockade going on in Poland, but apparently the Polish protesters have lifted the blockade at the Hrebin-Rawa-Ruska crossing on the Ukrainian border. Know that several other crossings were already still open, so I don't know what the details of this one were. And that's through the international stuff. Let's go ahead and jump into the front lines, and I've got something that happened in Luhansk to talk about as well. Not a lot of changes today in the actual lines. The Russians reportedly occupied Ivanivka. That would be right here, southeast of Kupiansk is right here. And it's not a large area. It's just kind of some of this open territory to the north of it. And Ivanivka itself, which is, as you can tell, not exactly a large metropolis. On the other hand, a Ukrainian drone attacked a lone diesel locomotive stopped in front of a train station in Sudza-Kursk, Russia. You can see it go right in the side. We don't get a good view of the aftermath, so we don't know what was hit or how much damage was done. There doesn't appear to have been a secondary explosion or anything. The area where it's striking should be right in the middle of its diesel-electric power plant. But I don't know the design that well, so I'm just talking about what little I know about it. War Gonzo, our favorite Russian source here, kind of confirms the information we talked about additional fighting in various areas. Many areas, the lines of control haven't changed on the slightest. Talked about Volchansk, which he is not quite acknowledging that the Ukrainians are making progress there yet. Sometimes he holds off a little bit on that, but, considering how things change on the front lines, not a big surprise. Dmitry at War Translated states that Ukrainian Marines defeated Russian assault troops in Volchansk. 2 commanders of assault companies and 4 soldiers surrendered during a counterattack by soldiers of the 36th Marine Brigade. They do claim 2 Russian assault companies were almost completely destroyed, with both of the company commanders being among those who surrendered. Similarly, over in Flybok, where the Russians attempted yet another assault just the other day, Ukrainians have managed to drive Russian forces out as well. There's no details on the who, what, when, where, why, or how. I presume it's under OPSEC conditions right now. But overall, this is a good first sign that the Russians are falling back in Kharkiv area. If the Ukrainians can successfully push them back out of Kharkiv, it could mean the easing of the overall situation on the front lines to a great extent. So that'll be awesome news if this keeps up as it is. Orozhine or Staromayorsk, this is basically a reassessment of the situation there, with Russia increasing their presence inside Staromayorsk and consolidating fields close to the entrance of Orozhine. Chasiv Yar also shows a small Russian advance along a forest strip towards the Donbass Canal. This is now a natural barrier and defensive line. And the Russian military bloggers are now starting to confirm that Ukrainian troops managed to push Russians back inside Volchansk. And that's confirming the information over the last couple of days, where Russians are basically holding on to the outskirts on the northwest part of town, whereas the east and central parts of the town are now firmly under Ukrainian control. Now let's talk about Luhansk for just a moment. There was a strike on the city with ATACMS missiles. And it was a known location that Russians have been using since 2014, a long-term military base, effectively. We have video of the various angles and things like that for the arrival of these missiles. You can see it in multiple various definitions here. This is that base from 10 years ago, 2016 actually, so 8 years ago for this image. This is that same location, or at least that building today, heavily damaged, near destroyed. The open source intelligence researchers confirmed the location and all the information here. They've been using it as a place to park military equipment since 2014, and they've been watching this for this entire time. The Russians claim this was done by ATACMS, which generally matches what we're seeing, but they also claimed that ATACMS also hit a residential building. And this kind of went the rounds for a little while earlier today, and things have been kind of shaking out on this. I've got a little video of that in a moment or two, and I'll talk about it in just a moment, at least from my limited knowledge here. The conclusion that Western powers are making here is that an air defense missile exploded outside of the building and causing damage to the fascia and the front of the building, and mostly windows and trim, not a big amount of damage. But the Russians are absolutely going on and on about this being an ATACMS strike on a residential building. Let's see if we can find that video for you. By the way, the Russians are not providing the video of it or the wreckage or any of that type of thing showing what it would look like. This is the long distance video of that strike. Very shaky, so I do apologize for that. Then there's the picture of the damage, and you can see damaged windows and things like that. Some damage up top here, maybe some burning up here on the top floor. Oh, where did the video go? Dang it, I had a good video. Literally showed the... Oh, maybe this is it. Nope, no, that's not it. Nope, different one. Okay. There was a video, and I don't have it handy, unfortunately. I must have neglected to pull it out here, unless. I thought it was here in OSN Technical. Nope. Yeah, this is just too late. There was a very clear picture of a missile coming in and exploding about 40, 60 feet away from the front of the building. And the conclusion I drew from it was that it was an air defense missile that exploded right in front of the building. That was my conclusion. I'll see if I can find that video again. I do sort through so many different things going through trying to find your reports for this that sometimes things get dropped. Maybe it's in the extras. Nope, not today. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. If I can find it, I will bring it to you in a future video. Have you ever seen a drive-by shooting between a Ukrainian Bradley and a Russian BTR with men falling off the sides of the BTR in the middle of the firefight? Well, this is that video. I gotta mute the audio, though. You can see a distant shot here as the vehicles are getting closer, and their long-range shooting going on here. I believe that's the BTR right there. You can see soldiers falling off as it blasts through here. Here's the Bradley going by, shooting at it. You can see a lot of the impacts on the front of the BTR. Literally a drive-by shooting with a 25 millimeter Bushmaster. Crazy. This Russian prankster, and I got this one's one I got. Hold on, let me pause this for a moment. Let's see what this looks like if I full screen it. Nope, we're going to have to rework this. And bear with me just one moment as I make some adjustments here. Let's see. That one. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead. This is just gets you my full screen right here. So apologies for that. Let's go ahead and play this. This prankster took a picture of Vladimir Putin, went into a local apartment complex, and you'll see what it looks like. And I won't be reading this because there is a little bit of language in it, but pay attention to what the people say. It's in the subtitles.
Отлично, кажется. Так, теперь устанавливаем камеру, чтобы никто, не дай бог, не украл.
Твою мать! Охренели!
О, ну что это?
Ё-моё!
В смысле, серьезно? What the f***? А можно? Куда обратиться? Я не хочу вот это вот смотреть.
Это худшее, что могло случиться с нашим домом после капремонта. Зачем? Зачем?
Ой, ёб твою мать. Какой дурак повесил.
Я знаю, а вот здесь вот камера.
Ну не надо
Они
звониться.
за нами следят.
It's the worst thing that could happen after the renovation. That was one that really just caught my funny bone overall. And it's clear that Vladimir Putin, much as he might like to declare that he is the most amazingest person around and everybody loves him, which sounds awfully familiar, but I'm not going to address that one further in this video. He may not be as popular as he believes he is. And for the last thing we're going to look at today, I didn't have time to grab a cat video for you, but I think maybe you'll accept that perhaps there is an alternative that might be even better. And that is, this is a motorcycle that's got a cage put around it, and it's been covered beyond that. And I believe, if I recall correctly, there is a successful strike here. You could just barely at the very end see the driver of the motorcycle running away. So that's pretty much everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate having you here. Things are just always in action, in motion over in Ukraine. And sometimes there's just too much, and other times it's just right. And sometimes it's a little quiet. Today was a little extra busy, but I want you to know that I do appreciate you being here with me today so we can stay informed about what's going on in the war and what's the kind of insane things are going on across the world. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.